Nestled among undulating hills, the town of Willow Creek was a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Secrets were difficult to preserve, and scandals seldom went quiet for very long. Hence, this interconnection was both a gift and a drawback. Living in this apparently peaceful village was 18-year-old Emily Turner, a vivacious young woman with goals that transcended her father's ambitious schemes. Samuel Turner had great impact in Willow Creek. Being a self-made entrepreneur, he was admired for his success and dreaded for his relentless rigidity, particularly with regard to his only daughter, Emily. Samuel's life was centered on his exacting plans and high standards. She would be attending a top university, a stepping stone toward a distinguished profession that would confirm the Turner legacy. Emily's heart, meanwhile, sung another song. She had developed strong feelings for Alex Miller, a good-hearted young man employed on the nearby ranch. Unlike the great aspirations Samuel had for Emily, Alex's life was basic and consisted in the honest work of caring to animals and the land. Though they lived in different worlds, Emily and Alex's love blossomed in secret, out from the town's prying eyes and her father's repressive authority. Their only comfort were their secret rendezvous, their love flourishing under the shelter of starry sky and the whispering leaves of the old oak trees. They would sneak time together in the meadows. Away from Willow Creek, they talked about a future together where they might create their own parameters for life. Their ideal was of a modest ranch, a house bursting with laughter, love, and the simplicity of life, lived unhindered. But the specter of Samuel always dominated their aspirations, not only because of his limited wealth, but also because Samuel's vision for her future did not include love or happiness. It was a vision built in status and control. Emily knew her father would never approve of Alex. Emily felt great pressure, but her love for Alex offered her the hope for a different life. The turning point arrived on a cool autumn evening, when Emily at last plucked the bravery to face her father. She discovered him in his study, surrounded by the trappings of his success, books, accolades, and the always available records outlining his future intentions for her. Her heart racing in her chest, she revealed her wants. She wanted to be with Alex, to start a modest life with the man she loved, far away from the stifling expectations of Willow Creek. Samuel responded quickly and brutally. His angry expression twisted. He wrote off her dreams as young fancies. He threatened to disown her should she disobey, barred her from visiting Alex. Emily was crying, and Samuel was more eager than ever to force his will upon her as the confrontation concluded. Once started, though, love is not readily extinguished. Emily and Alex kept seeing one another in secret, their relationship deepening daily. They made preparations to elope, to shed Samuel's heavy expectations, and begin again, somewhere where their love would blossom. Dreaming of the day they could at last be together without fear, they saved what meager money they could. Samuel's doubts had been stirred, unbeknownst to them. His need for control drove him to engage a private investigator, who shortly found the plans of the young couples. Samuel was enraged by the disclosure, a storm just waiting to be released, simmering just beneath the surface. The evening Samuel found their scheme was the evening everything changed. Furious, he confronted Emily, showing the investigator's report as proof of her treachery. Their disagreement grew rapidly, with deeply felt words of wrath and disappointment cutting right through. Samuel struck Emily in a fit of unbounded wrath, the force of his blow sending her toppling to the floor. She stilled herself. Her breath was a whisper as life passed away. The town woke up the next morning to a terrible sight. Samuel, upset and messy, looked over Emily's dead body, found at the foot of the steps. He said she had fallen asleep in the evening, and it was a terrible disaster. But the marks on her body and the proof of a violent battle revealed a different narrative, one of a father's frantic attempt to govern his daughter's life, leading to terrible catastrophe. The following was an exhaustive and unrelenting inquiry. Searching the Turner house, detectives assembled the circumstances preceding Emily's death. Heartbroken and saddened, Alex gave vital information on their alcoholic intentions, therefore undermining Samuel's credibility. The report of the private investigator on Samuel's mounting wrath and compulsive control over Emily presented a terrible image of a man pushed to extremes. Samuel's formerly perfect reputation collapsed as the evidence grew. He was imprisoned and accused of killing his daughter. The community he previously held such respect now withdraws in horror. The trial turned into a spectacle, attracting throngs anxious to see a man with so much authority fall from grace. Emily's death came to represent the terrible results of control and the extent one would go to in order to achieve it. The trial exposed the depths of Samuel's fixation on his daughter's future, an obsession that finally brought about her terrible death. Samuel's actions weighed heavily in the courtroom as the jury considered, a sobering reminder of a love corrupted by the demand for control. The events that had transpired permanently altered Willow Creek's previously close-knit society. For many who knew Emily, her narrative resonated in their hearts as a sobering reminder of the transience of dreams and the terrible force of a love pursued instead of nurtured. Though the tragedy left behind will never completely heal, ultimately, justice was done. The little town appeared to whisper secrets in the breeze under the dappled sunlight streaming through the ancient oak trees. Everyone knew everyone there was, and the entwined lives produced a web of relationships occasionally as oppressive as they were consoling. Living in this village was Emily, a vivid 18-year-old with dreams as large as the horizon. Emily's life was a careful balancing act between her own aspirations for freedom and love and Samuel, her ambitious father's expectations. Samuel was a man of significance in the society, loved for his intelligence and terrified for his rigidity. A prosperous guy, he had painstakingly scheduled Emily's future. She was going to a famous university, one he had decided would help to improve their family name even further. Emily, though, belonged to another dream. She had developed feelings for a modest young man employed at a nearby ranch, Alex. Though his finances were small and his life was basic, Emily could sense in him a great joy of life and a kindness. The friendship between Emily and Alex grew in the shadows, out of sight to Samuel's exacting gaze. Often they met at the border of the ranch, where wildflowers grew wild, in sharp contrast to Samuel's strict control over Emily's life. Far from the weight of expectations and pressures Emily carried, they dreamed of a life together. Emily plucked the bravery one evening to tell her father about her fantasies as the sun sank in a brilliant orange and red blaze. She discovered him in his study, surrounded by books and documentation, outlining the future he had intended for her. Her voice quivering, she said of her love for Alex and her wish to lead a modest life with him. Samuel's angry darkening of his face caused the air to get tight. He forbade her from seeing Alex ever again and discounted her statements as naive and stupid. Emily's attitude, meanwhile, was not readily subdued. She kept seeing Alex in secret, intending to flee and start over with him. Every dollar they saved, they plotted their departure and clung to the belief that love would sweep over everything. Unbeknownst to them, Samuel's doubts mounted. Driven to learn Emily's secrets, he paid a private detective to track her. Samuel's world broke that day he learned Emily's intention to elope with Alex. Approaching Emily with the investigator's report, his rage was unbounded. He locked her off like a prisoner, banned her from leaving the house. Though Emily's heart was racked with desperation, her will stayed broken. Samuel's wrath became fatal late one night. His visage a mask of wrath and disappointment, he attacked Emily once again in a frenzy of unquenchable rage. Their dispute grew more intense, every word a blade in the thin thread of their marriage. Samuel attacked Emily in a moment of blind fury, the force of his blow sending her toppling to the ground. She lay quiet, her breath a whisper as life passed from her. The town wakes up the following morning to find something quite sinister. Emily's dead body was discovered at the bottom of the stairs, Samuel's unhappy form standing over her. She had fallen in a terrible accident, he said, and it was just that. Her body's marks, however, revealed another narrative, one of violence and betrayal. The next probe was quick and exhaustive. Detectives crowded the residence, trying to fit Emily's dying moments into the terrible jigsaw. Heartbroken and shattered, Alex gave vital details about their escape strategy, therefore casting more doubt on Samuel's account. The report of the private investigator on Samuel's developing wrath and control over Emily presented a negative picture. Samuel's seeming respectability fell apart as the evidence grew mounting. Arrested and charged with murder of his daughter, the community he once commanded now turned its back on him. The trial that followed was a spectacle. The courtroom packed with former admirers of Samuel, now keen for justice to be done. Emily's death evolved to represent the conflict between love and control, her narrative resounding in the hearts of all who knew her. The trial exposed the depths of Samuel's fixation with managing Emily's life, a perverted want that finally resulted in her sad death. Samuel's deeds weighed heavily in the air as the jury considered, a sobering reminder of the fallout from a love that descended into wrath. Willow Creek was humming with rumors and conjecture in the days after Emily passed away. Whispers of murder and treachery swept over the Turner home like wildfire. Once a revered person, Samuel suddenly came under mistrust and contempt. Once appreciative of his accomplishments, the locals now viewed him with a mix of disgust and terror. Assignated to the case was Detective Mark Davis. Having a sharp eye for detail, Davis was a seasoned detective, driven to find the truth. Early in the morning, he showed up at the Turner house and saw Samuel being hauled away in handcuffs. Reporters and inquisitive spectators crowding for a view of the man accused of such a horrible murder made the scene disorderly. Davis started his research right inside the house. Unlike the catastrophe that had happened, the living room was immaculate. He observed the family pictures hanging on the walls. Emily as a little child, her brilliant smile and glittering eyes caught in happy times. These pictures did not fit the reality of her horrific demise. Davis headed for the stairway Emily had been discovered on. Blood soaked the carpet, and the banister exhibited evidence of fight. He observed her body's traces of violence and hopelessness, the bruises that revealed a narrative. Emily had struggled for her life. It was obvious this was no accident. Davis visited everyone who had been near Emily over the next few days. Her pals told of her dreams and her love for Alex. She was a vibrant young woman, they said, aspired for freedom and pleasure. Alex, too, was heartbroken. His loss was evident as he related their intentions for departure and start of a life together. His evidence was vital, since it gave Samuel's actions reason. Additionally, presenting his results was the hired private investigator for Samuel. He had recorded Samuel's growing annoyance and resentment toward Emily as he tried to regulate any element of her life. The data presented a terrible picture of a guy driven by his need for control, unable to see his daughter dreaming of her own. More specifics regarding Samuel's character surfaced as the inquiry went forward. Business partners and colleagues said he was a man who insisted on excellence and who was relentless in his chase of success. His connection with Emily was no different. He considered her as an extension of himself, someone to shape and mold to his image. His relentless craving for control had driven him to the brink and resulted in the terrible events of that fatal evening. Samuel Turner's trial started on a chilly winter morning, the courtroom crowded with people ready to see justice done. With its strong case, which included Samuel's abuse and control of Emily, the prosecution witnesses attested to his explosive temper and his threats to disown her should she disobey his requests. The testimony of Alex was quite moving. He talked of their dreams, their love, and the anxiety they had been plagued with in the days before Emily passed away. Many in the courtroom, in sharp contrast to Samuel's cool, unrepentant attitude, found tears in their eyes as he spoke. Unable to understand Emily had chosen love over his future ambitions, Samuel had killed her in a fit of wrath, according to the prosecution. Still, the defense tried to present an other picture. They said Samuel had simply lost control in a flash of frustration. Emily's death was a terrible accident. They cited his perfect record and community service as proof of his moral fiber. Still, the weight of the data against him was crushing. The jury considered for several hours as the trial came to an end. Everyone in the courtroom was clearly tense as they waited for the decision. At last, the foreman stood and declared Samuel Turner guilty of first-degree murder. Though justice had been done, the audience burst in a mixture of elation and grief. Justice could not bring Emily back. Willow Creek battled to make sense of what had happened following the trial. Samuel was sentenced to life in prison. His once bright future now lived behind bars, in a dark existence. Once a sign of affluence, the Turner house was empty and neglected, a reminder of the catastrophe the family had suffered. Emily's passing left an emptiness never satisfied. Her friends and loved ones laments her death. Their recollections of her serve as a mixed reminder of what might have been. Though crushed, Alex promised to honor her memory. Working at the ranch, he poured his love and loss into the ground, once their haven. The community started to mend over time. But the narrative of Emily Turner and the father who could not let go was a sobering reminder of the terrible force of control and the need of letting aspirations blossom, whatever they differences from our own might be. For Willow Creek High School, Emily Turner was its pulse. Her laughter reverberated down the hallways, and her compassion touched everyone she came across. Her peers jealous of her beauty and grace. Teachers praised her intelligence and commitment. Benevolent Emily's grin belies a shadow. Her father, Samuel Turner, always present. He had charted every turn of her life, and deviation was not a possibility. The greatest kept secret in the community was Emily's passion for Alex Miller. When Emily was barely 15 years old, they had met at a nearby fair. Over the cotton candy machine, Alex, a year older, was working at a food stand, caught her eyes. From that point on, they were inseparable, comforted in one other's presence, away from the town's inquisitive eyes, and, above all, away from Samuel. Samuel had stifling influence over Emily. He limited her trips, watched her phone calls, and even controlled her friends. Emily's life was a well-crafted calendar of classes, extracurricular activities, and study sessions. Emily grabbed on, but she found little windows of freedom to be with Alex. Her lifeblood, these fleeting moments drove her hope for a time, free from her father's repressive control. Their meeting venues were frequently quiet areas on the outskirts of town. One of their favorites was a little area in the forest with a meandering creek. For hours they would sit thinking about the life they wanted to start together. Alex dreamed of renovating his grandfather's run-down ranch into their house. Though small, it was theirs, a far cry from the lofty ideas Samuel had for Emily. Samuel was left as Emily's mother, Laura, had died while a young child. After Laura passed away, Samuel became even more resolved to shield Emily from what he saw as the terrible facts of life. He was guaranteeing her a future devoid of suffering in his view. Actually, though, he was locking her inside a cage he created. The weight on Emily grew as graduation drew near. Samuel had already guaranteed her acceptance into one of the best universities in the nation, together with a demanding pre-med program. Emily's heart, nevertheless, was not in that. She wanted to be an artist, an ambition Samuel judged useless and unworkable. His hold tightened. The more she rebelled, Alex and Emily decided one day they couldn't wait no more. They had discovered a tiny town a few hundred miles distant where they could start over and had saved enough money to get by for some time. Samuel would be least likely to find their absence soon away. Thus the goal was to leave straight after graduation, during the frenzy of the festivities. Nonetheless, fate had other ideas. Sensing Emily's attitude change, Samuel became more dubious. His concern drove him to engage a private investigator who promptly found Emily and Alex's scheme. Filled with pictures and minute details of their encounters, the investigator's report arrived at Samuel's desk the day before Emily and Alex were scheduled to depart. That evening, the Turner house was battered inside as much as outside. Samuel showed Emily the report, clearly enraged. Trapped and frightened, Emily at last let years of pent-up anger flow. She said to Samuel she was leaving. She loved Alex, and she could not live under his repressive control anymore. Her rebellious statements merely stoked Samuel's wrath. Samuel hit out in a moment of blind wrath. Though brief, the fight was aggressive. Unprepared for the physical confrontation, Emily stumbled down the steps. The storm outside muffled the sound of her body striking the ground. Samuel stood motionless, the truth of what he had done gradually settling him. Emily lay still, her delicate body crushed alongside her dreams. The real horror of the previous night emerged as the storm clouds cleared the following morning. Her body was found, and the cops were summoned. Shock-driven Samuel first said it was an accident, but the indications of a scuffle and the wounds suggested another tale. The investigation moved quickly. The investigation was assigned to seasoned investigator with a reputation for thoroughness, Detective Mark Davis. The private investigator's findings, along with Alex's and Emily's friends' testimony, clearly depicted a father's extreme control spiraling into violence. The weight of the reality tore apart Samuel's well-manicured front. For Willow Creek, the trial marked a sea change. Town people, reporters, and individuals who had known Emily crowded the courtroom. In shocked silence, they listened as the prosecution went over Samuel's violent control over his daughter and the terrible results of his activities. Witness after witness attested to the changes Emily had undergone and the anxiety that had started to cloud her once clear eyes. Alex's story broke my heart. He talked of their love, their aspirations, and the hope they had carried through adversity. His comments created an image of dreams dead with Emily, of a future never to arrive. Driven by his candor and the overwhelming proof, the jury decided Samuel guilty of first-degree murder. Samuel received a life-in-prison sentence devoid of parole possibility. Once a strong man ruling his house and neighborhood, he was now only another prisoner, his future as dark as the walls separating him. Though always traumatized by the event, Willow Creek started to recover. Recalling Emily's vivid energy and the love she had shared with Alex helped her friends and loved ones find comfort. Though still in great grief, Alex turned his anguish into fulfillment of their ideal. He started to repair his grandfather's ranch with community support. Emily's memory lived on in the flowers she loved, the artwork she had dreamed of producing, and the lives she had touched, a place of healing and recollection. Emily's narrative was a moving reminder of the value of freedom, the terrible nature of control, and the strength of love, that which persists. This lesson permeated Willow Creek's hallways, making sure no other fantasies would be so sadly muted. Those who knew Emily Turner carried her ghostly lesson of the frailty of life and the consequences of unbridled power in their hearts and brains. Willow Creek started to steadily go forward as the days stretched into weeks and the weeks into months. But Emily's terrible death left a shadow that never went away. The Turner mansion lay abandoned, a ghost of its past life. Samuel's arrest and trial later had left it abandoned, a mute monument to the events that had shocked a society and devastated a family. The once immaculate gardens were overgrown, and the windows, which had once shined with pride, were now dead and drab. Like its former owner, the mansion was a shell of what it had been. Alex Miller discovered a means of honoring Emily's memories despite his loss. He turned his grandfather's run-down property into a refuge with community help. It became a sanctuary where aspirations might blossom, a far cry from the strict expectations that had formerly choked Emily. Now, humming with activity, the ranch represented resiliency and promise. The residents banded together around Alex to assist in his reconstruction of the property. It turned into a group activity, a means of helping them to sort through their loss and direct it towards something good. The same vivid wildflowers Emily had admired now abound in the once barren pastures. Once a dream near to Emily's heart, the barn, which had stood in ruin for years, was now a venue for art and creativity. The ranch opened out as a haven of healing as the seasons changed. It held gatherings bringing people together, art lessons, and community events. Emily's spirit lingered there, her dreams embedded right into the fabric of the earth. The painting gave Alex comfort. His love for Emily drove him to be determined to turn the tragedy into something beautiful. Samuel's existence in prison, meantime, was a far cry from the dominance he had formerly overstood. Once a strong and hated businessman, his days were monotony and routine, like any other inmate. He spent his time considering his behavior, his guilt a regular friend. Cold and relentless, the walls of his cell reflected the prison he had created that had caused the death of his daughter. The trial had exposed Samuel's extreme control obsession and his urge to manage every element of Emily's life. It became an obsession that blinded him to her dreams, happiness, and finally, her life. The overwhelming proof offered during the trial painted a picture of a guy whose love had been twisted into something terrible. The prosecution in the courtroom had painstakingly described Samuel's spiral into violence and fury. Witnesses related stories of his dominating demeanor and his rejection of Emily's freedom. The report of the private investigator had been a crucial piece of evidence since it exposed Samuel's degree of monitoring and rising paranoia. Driven by the weight of the facts and the testimony, the jury had rendered a verdict that was both just and terrible. The truth of Samuel's acts struck in when his sentence started. Once a painstaking planner who had charted Emily's future, he now faced the fallout from his quest for control. His days were spent reflecting and revisiting that fatal night in his head. Haunted him was his daughter's face, hers full of rebellion and terror. It served as a reminder of the life he had forfeit in pursuit of control. Emily's narrative became a potent teaching tool in Willow Creek. It was a warning story of the perils of control and the need of letting loved ones follow their own aspirations. Particularly parents embraced the idea, trying to help their children fulfill their dreams, instead of imposing their own expectations. Those who had loved Emily felt her loss most vividly in their hearts. Once scattered by the winds of time, her companions came back to each other, drawn by their common loss. Living their lives with the enthusiasm and freedom Emily had always wanted, they honored her legacy. Knowing Emily's spirit was with them every step, they followed their own dreams. For Alex, losing Emily was a continual agony, but the love and encouragement of the community helped him balance it. He gave the ranch his all so that others can find comfort and delight. His art courses turned into a lighthouse of hope, a means of expression for people to heal from personal loss and communicate their feelings. Alex made sure Emily's legacy would endure by his labor. Her dreams would inspire and uplifting anyone visiting the ranch always. Years went by, and Emily Turner's narrative found place in Willow Creek's past. It was a narrative passed on to next generations, a reminder of the need of freedom and the power of love. Thriving and energetic, the ranch was evidence of Emily's energy and the ongoing vitality of the human heart. Preserved in the hearts of those who knew her, her memory kept motivating deeds of love, compassion, and creativity. Ultimately, Emily's life had a great influence, even if it was sadly cut short. It united a community, spurred change, and left a resilient legacy of optimism. Her narrative, a tapestry of love, sorrow, and rebirth, served as a reminder that the human spirit can find a path to heal and blossom, even in the face of unthinkable catastrophe. And thus, the town of Willow Creek progressed, always altered by Emily Turner's life and death. Once repressed by tyranny, her dreams had blossomed in the hearts of people bearing her memory. Representing her legacy, the ranch kept flourishing, where love and freedom could blossom, and where Emily's soul would always be a lighthouse.